own debate. Senator Deacon, Nova Scotia.
Thank you, Speaker, and honourable colleagues. What a day. Robust discussion about competition law reform in the Senate. That's a great day from my standpoint, and I've long awaited the arrival of C-59, the Fall Economic Statement Implementation Act, because C-59 includes several specific measures that will increase competition, drive innovation, improve productivity growth, and ultimately improve our prosperity. However, I think it is worth repeating our collective frustration in receiving not one but two complex spending bills from the House of Commons in the last couple of weeks. The 546-page C-59 was tabled in November, nearly 7 months ago. Yet it arrived just before the 686-page Bill C-69, the current Budget Implementation Act, which was tabled only 2 months ago. I think it's irresponsible to force the Senate to rush our study of these highly consequential bills. That aside, I am thrilled to be speaking about 3 of C-59's legislative changes that I think will drive innovation into our economy. These include changes to the Canadian Payments Act and the investment tax credits for clean tech projects. I will get into those in a moment, but first, I want to review the important changes to the Competition Act and the Competition Tribunal Act. Over the past 2 years, this government has introduced the most consequential changes to Canada's competition laws since the Competition Act was first introduced in the 1980s. Why is this important? Last October, the Competition Bureau released an 20-year analysis of the steadying diminishing levels of competition and steadily increasing levels of corporate concentration right across Canada. More and more sectors now have too few competitors, much to the benefit of our largest firms and the detriment of consumers. Consumers are finally becoming frustrated because profits and markups have steadily risen in every industry where concentration is high. Hardworking innovators are frustrated because regulations, initially designed to protect consumers, now represent an all too costly barrier to entry. This regulatory barrier protects oligopolies from competitive threats, the competitive threats posed by new innovators, and the lack of robust competitive threat means that the incumbent oligopoly feels less pressure to innovate. Stronger competition policy across the whole of government is now broadly seen as being crucial to stimulating market forces that will, 1, help to increase business investment, 2, improve fairness in the marketplace, and 3, reduce prices for consumers. So what are the proposed changes in C-59 and why are they important? Part 5, Division 6, includes several important changes to the Competition Act and the Competition Tribunal Act. These changes are the final elements of those considered in Industry Canada's consultation on the future of competition policy in Canada, conducted between November 22 and March 23. A consultation, as Senator Monsieur mentioned, I think was very much encouraged by Senator Howard Wetston's earlier work. The changes in this bill build upon amendments first introduced in Bill C-19, the Budget Implementation Act of 2022, which was on wage fixing and no-poach agreements, and Bill C-56, the so-called Affordable Housing and Groceries Act, which enabled the initiation of market studies by the Competition Bureau and removed the efficiencies defense. I entirely support the government's and House Finance Committee's amendments to the Competition Act and Competition Tribunal Act. Critics often observe that these legislative changes have occurred in a piecemeal manner over the last 2 years. In my opinion, this criticism overlooks the fact that these amendments have been intensely focused on giving our competition cops meaningful enforcement powers. Allow me to share some data to illustrate how incredibly bad things were prior to 2022. The Competition Act amendments in sections 92, 93, and 97 focus on changing how mergers will be reviewed, primarily by the following. 1, the criteria that triggers the requirement for parties to send the Bureau a pre-merger notification are being widened. For context, a fellow and researcher at the Centre for International Governance Innovation, Keldon Bester, identified that there were 16,000 mergers in Canada between 2016 and 2022. However, he found that the Bureau was notified in only 8% of those mergers, And our laws at that time enabled the Bureau to challenge only 33 of those mergers in some way. 33 mergers in this country's last 6 years were able to be challenged out of 16,000, only 0.2%. Number two, market concentration and dominant market position will now be explicit factors for the tribunal to consider. For context, C.D. Howe found that since the 1980s, the tribunal heard only 8 merger cases. 7 involved concentration levels that created or preserved market shares above 60%. And 4 of these mergers would create monopolies or near monopolies. Yet the tribunal only ordered remedies in 2 of those cases. 3, the time frame where the Commissioner can challenge a non-notified merger will increase from 1 year to 3 years, giving the Bureau the ability to more broadly address killer acquisitions and harmful mergers. An especially egregious recent example is Dye & Durham's purchase of real estate software. The company behaved for a year until the Bureau no longer had the ability to act. Over the next months, the company introduced a massive 10-fold price hikes. And 4, by ensuring that merger reviews consider the effects on labor markets. This will force the tribunal to explicitly consider the lessening of competition in the labor market as a factor in merger review. Bill C-59 also introduces private rights of action. This is a highly consequential change because under specific circumstances, it would allow for private claimants to apply to the tribunal to exercise this right. Importantly, the tribunal holds a gatekeeping role as it relates to these new rights and could deny cases, notably if they are considered frivolous or vexatious. This gatekeeping role is not new to the tribunal. Additionally, these rights would come into force 1 year after the bill receives royal assent. Bill C-59 also responds to growing calls to empower a consumer's right to repair their products by broadening the refusal to deal provisions in the Competition Act. These amendments complement the proposed amendments to the Copyright Act in the 2 right to repair bills currently at committee stage here in the Senate, Bills C-244 and 294. And I'm sure you're all recalling my riveting speech on Bill C-244 as it related to technological protection measures. Lastly, and very importantly, Bill C-59 includes a timely response to the shocking decision rendered by the Competition Tribunal on August 28, 2023, where the tribunal awarded Rogers & Shaw $13 million to offset their legal fees. You may recall that beginning in April 2022, the Bureau undertook to challenge the Rogers & Shaw merger under Canada's completely outdated Competition Act. When the Bureau lost this challenge, the tribunal ordered the Bureau to pay the merging parties' legal fees because of how vigorously the Bureau fought this merger, based on compelling evidence. I think the decision caused a WTF moment across the country. That stands for what the fuddle-duddle. Especially because it was realized that taxpayers would be the ones paying these legal fees. As a result of this outrageous decision, I was especially pleased to see the government amend the Competition Tribunal Act to ensure that in future, the robust defense of competition in case adjudication would not result in legal cost awards. So those are, broadly speaking, the government's proposed amendments introduced in C-59. Additionally, the Competition Bureau submitted several recommendations to further strengthen C-59, and most of these were accepted at committee stage in the House of Commons. These amendments included, 1, removing legislative loopholes to further prevent companies from hiding additional fees through drip pricing and encourage price transparency. We've all seen this drip pricing cause prices to creep up by as much as 30% through the addition of a convenience fee, a processing fee, a cleaning fee, a resort fee, you name it. The Bureau's objective is simple. Businesses should advertise and compete based on their fully costed price. Number 2, recommending that businesses who promote their interests using environmental claims be required to substantiate those claims if challenged and when challenged by the Bureau. I think we just heard our colleagues speak very strongly about this. Number 3, adopting a reverse onus approach where businesses must prove their discounts are legitimate if challenged by the Bureau. And 4, implementing new remedies for anti-competitive mergers specifically intended to restore or preserve the level of competition that existed prior to an anti-competitive merger. I want to pause for a second on this one. Historically, increased concentration was guaranteed in the Canadian economy. Why? Because until now, if a merger was expected to cause a substantial reduction in competition, the remedy could only remove the word substantial, not the word reduction. So we were guaranteed that every merger in this country would make an industry less competitive and more concentrated. With the implementation of this amendment, the pre-merger levels of competition must be restored. That's a very good thing and a very big change. Finally, the House Finance Committee itself went beyond the original request of the Competition Bureau and made an amendment in Clause 236 that broadened deceptive marketing practices to include environmental misrepresentations that would be assessed using, and we heard this before, quote, an internationally recognized methodology, unquote. This was intended to capture greenwashing claims, but instead the definition introduces uncertainty because no specific methodology exists. Uncertainty is anything but helpful for anyone, including the Competition Bureau. At the Senate's National Finance Committee, Senator Ross introduced an amendment to remove these 3 words, but it was defeated. I completely support the concerns that were compellingly argued by Senators Ross and Tanis and that were cited in the committee's observations. However, I do believe that we will be seeing clarifying guidance well before this provision comes into force, as the Bureau committed that it would do in a letter to the committee. The fact that we were only able to discover and address this problematic issue in the last minute of is yet another illustration of the challenges created when the Senate is not provided sufficient time to fulfill our legislative responsibilities. Colleagues, over the past 2 years, tremendous progress has been made in competition law reform, and I commend the government for their efforts. However, we are far from done. We still require a robust whole-of-government approach to removing anti-competitive policies, programs, regulations, and legislation across each department and agency. Why? Because Canada has OECD levels of regulatory burden, leading levels of regulatory burden. We have too many command and control regulations that describe the process that must be followed rather than the desired outcome to be achieved. And this eliminates the ability to innovate. We need to act with national urgency across our government and economy. A leading researcher in this field, Professor Thomas Ross, provided compelling testimony at the House Industry Committee on June 10th when he observed that, and I quote, the Competition Act, the Bureau, and the Tribunal really just take care of one big slice of competition in Canada, but not the whole pie. Outdated and anti-competitive, end quote. Outdated and anti-competitive programs, policies, and regulations exist across the whole of government, and Canada's global competitiveness will never improve until we begin to streamline this burden. I've long said that you can never regulate a company into becoming customer-centric. Only competition can achieve that all-important goal. And I want to just give you an example, if I could, that just saw today, reminded of today. Australia's national competition policy has encompassed all levels of government and has reviewed and updated over 1,800 laws and regulations. Federal transfer payments enabled states and territories to be important partners in the effort, and the effort conservatively has been estimated to result in a permanent 2.5% increase in Australia's GDP, worth roughly $5,000 per household per year. So the return on investment in streamlining our regulations and our legislation is really significant, and Australia has proven it, and Canada can do it. Continuing on the theme of increased competition driving innovation, Part 5, Division 5 of Bill C-59 includes changes to the Canadian Payments Act. These changes will allow new members to join Payments Canada, specifically those who are payment service providers supervised by the Bank of Canada under the Retail Payments Activities Act, which was an important part of Budget 2022. The Bank of Canada's accreditation process for payment service providers has been developed in a robust and inclusive manner. Many of these new regulated participants are innovative Canadian-based financial technology companies who will introduce responsible, regulated innovation into Canada's payment systems that manage roughly 20 billion transactions worth about $10 trillion a year in this country. They also include credit unions who are part of a Credit Union Central. A Credit Union Central is a service provider that manages the financial infrastructure for multiple member institutions. Credit unions can often be the only financial institution in our rural and remote communities, and they'll finally have a direct voice at Payments Canada. They'll also be able to access the Bank of Canada's liquidity support. Additionally, proposed changes to the Canadian Payments Act will make sure that Payments Canada Stakeholder Advisory Council cannot include any Payments Canada members. The change will help the Advisory Council to better represent the views of all users in the payment system, like merchants, when giving advice to the Payments Canada Board. It's a small step towards good governance in the Payments Canada world, and it's crucial. And good governance is crucial to establishing trustworthy payment systems. My consistent concerns with Payment Canada's governance are primarily due to repeated delays in implementing Canada's real-time payments rail. Canada is now dead last in the G7 in introducing real-time payments, something that's crucial to providing Canadian businesses and citizens with instant financial transaction processing and improved cash flow and better and quicker fraud detection. First initiated in 2015, Payments Canada says that it now expects Canada's real-time payments rail to begin to be implemented in 2026. I'm compelled to note that 56 other countries never had these lengthy delays that put their citizens and businesses at a competitive and costly disadvantage. So I'm glad that we're seeing progress, but I continue to worry that tomorrow may never come. Lastly, I'm incredibly happy to see Part 1 of Bill C-56 that includes the clean technology investment tax credits that were first introduced in the 2022 Fall Economic Statement and then again in Budget 2023. This is a refundable tax credit for businesses that invest in eligible clean technology equipment, including things like carbon capture, low-carbon heating equipment, zero-emission equipment, and other energy systems that do not consume fossil fuels, systems like wind power. Where does that come? How does this work? Businesses investing in these technologies can get a refundable tax credit of up to 30% on their investment costs, making it easier to support clean technology projects that might otherwise be too expensive. With the federal government's goal of reaching net zero by 2050, including attaining net zero electricity by 2035, it's imperative that we continue to align incentives to catalyze innovation. The Nova Scotia government expects these tax credits to generate in our province more than $450 million in construction activity and create about 1,700 direct and indirect jobs over their lifetime, mostly in rural Nova Scotia. Additionally, they're expected to deliver tangible savings to Nova Scotians by lowering the average cost of electricity, saving taxpayers an estimated $100 million annually over the next 25 years. $100 million annually in reduced electricity costs. The projects will be operational by the end of 2025 and will reduce Nova Scotia's greenhouse gas emissions by more than 1 megaton annually, continuing to accelerate Canada's net zero transition. Colleagues, each of these initiatives in Bill C-59 harness innovation to improve the lives of Canadians. For this reason, I'm very happy to support this bill, thrilled, in fact. But one other thing came to my mind when Senator Monsignor was speaking. That was, you may recall, in 2021, so 3 years ago, we were debating Bill C-208, a private member's bill from the House of Commons. And it was working to make fair the intergenerational transfers between farming, fishing, and small business operations, which were not being given access to the lifetime capital gains tax exemption that everybody else in Canada had access to. There was significant pushback in this bill from the government in June 2021, but we held firm in the Senate, and we supported that bill supported by the House of Commons. There was a lot of us felt a lot of pressure at that time, and the Minister Freeland, was very concerned that this would unlock a whole series of inappropriate transactions, inappropriate intergenerational transfers. In fact, she fought back on even the coming into force date. But in the end, 2.5 years later, there wasn't evidence of a whole lot of fraud, but she did come through and put in place restrictions in this bill to make sure that those would not occur in the future. So we held firm, we did our job, and we're independent from the elected, from pushback against that bill. And in my mind, we did the right thing, and it's wonderful to see the loop being closed now eventually by the government, and things have we can be very proud of the work that we did. So all in all, I just want to congratulate Senator Monsignor for her speech, for her work, and also for your work in the bankruptcy and insolvency work around post-secondary institutions. And great to see that as well in the bill, Senator Monsignor. So congratulations. Thank you, colleagues.